This lesson 5, we're going to talk about decision making, and particularly decision making under the cases of situation of uncertainty. And so we'll talk about exactly what that means. So uncertainty is related to the case where we cannot assign probabilities cannot assign probabilities to the future states of nature, and those will become clear what we mean by that. Today, or this part of this lesson, we're going to talk about 3 different situations. We're going to take a look at decision making from the optimistic perspective, pessimistic perspective, and the perspective that we want to avoid regret, and those are the 3 cases that we're gonna look at today. And so we're going to start with this example. We're going to make a decision. Before I start that, these 3 we're going to look at today, or this first part of the lesson. And then the second part of the lesson, we're going to look at making decisions based on the criteria of Hurwitz criteria, Hurwitz approach, or the case of equal likelihood. So here, we'll begin with this example. Well, we have an investor, and our investor has 3 choices. In the way this data is organized, we're given 3 decisions, and we have only enough resources to choose one of these decisions, either to choose to invest in the apartment, to choose to invest in the office, or to choose to invest in the warehouse. Those are our only 3 choices, and we can only choose one. Then the next thing, that once we make those decisions, then we have to wait until something happens in the future. And in this particular example, we're given 3 different states of nature. The economy can either be good in the future, can be fair in the future, or be poor in the future. Those are the only things that can happen. But in either one of those situations, there will be the combination of what happens will present a return on that decision in conjunction with the state of nature in the future. So, for example, if we choose to invest in the apartment and then the economy is good, then that in particular choice in combination with the future will return $50,000 profit. And so that's again just the example. Similarly, if the economy is fair, we'll return $25,000. If the economy is poor, that decision would return $10,000, and so forth. But again, the key factor is you can only choose, only invest in one decision. Or only decide to make one investment. Okay. So the question is now, let's suppose our decision maker is an optimist, and if you're an optimist, the textbook will say that we're going to make this decision under the criteria of maxi-max. We're going to use the maxi-max criteria. But what I would want you to do is to think of if a person is an optimist, what does that mean? And how does that relate to this term maxi-max? Hopefully you can realize that if you are an optimist, that you believe the best thing is possible is going to happen. And so in that case, you're going to make the decision that takes the best of the best outcomes. And in this case, clearly the best thing that can happen is that you would return a profit of $100,000. And so if you believe that the best thing is going to happen, then your decision is going to be to invest in the office, and you'll return $100,000. So consequently, the maxi-max approach does the following. It does exactly that you're able to do with by inspection, essentially. And it does the following. We're going to consider each decision independently. And so for the apartment, we're going to build a table. And for the apartment, we're going to choose the maximum return for each one of these investments. And for the apartment, it is obvious that the maximum return, and is going to be $50,000. And then we're going to do the same thing for each respective option. For the office, that is $100,000. And for the warehouse, the best thing that could happen, the best return, maximum return, is $30,000. And so therefore, once we have these three, then we're also going to choose the maximum of those three. And clearly the maximum of those three values is $100,000. So if our decision maker is an optimist, the decision in the office and the return, that decision is $100,000. This is the situation for if our decision maker is an optimist. Okay, so now let's look into what if our decision maker is a pessimist, and the criteria that's outlined in the textbook is called maxi-min. And the maxi-min criteria, I didn't mean to erase that. In the maxi-min criteria, again, this is, if you're a pessimist, you're going to use the maxi-min criteria. And that criteria essentially states we're going to choose the best outcome from among all of the worst outcomes. And so you think the worst is going to happen, and so therefore you want to choose the best of the worst. And the way this proceeds is we're going to again build a column, and we're going to look at these returns. And for the apartment, we're going to determine what is the worst. If you invested in the apartment, what's the worst return? And that worst return is $10,000. It would still be a profit, but it's $10,000. So we're choosing the minimum return for each investment. And then for the office, the minimum return is negative 50,000. So we're going to lose 50,000. And then for the warehouse, the minimum return is negative 10,000. And then from among these three represent the worst that can happen if given any decision. And from among these three, we're going to choose the maximum, or we're going to choose the best of these, of the worst. And of course, those are 10,000. The best of the largest return is $10,000, and we would invest in the apartment. So the pessimistic situation, the best decision, and we'll see that the return is $10,000. Now let me say something about these net returns, and all of these returns in this table are net returns. And in this particular example, these would represent the net present value of those investments. So it would be the net present value. It would include all of the outlays, all of the expenses, and all of the profits. So and converted to a net present value. So they're truly comparable returns. So that's the case if your decision maker is a pessimist, would choose the best of the worst outcomes. Our decision would be to invest in the apartment, and that return would be $10,000. Then for the third decision criteria, is the decision maker wants to avoid or have the least possible regret about her decision. And in this situation, rather than looking with respect to the each decision option, we're going to consider this problem with respect to each one of the future states of nature, in this case, good, fair, and poor economies. So we're going to look at this from within this column. So we take the perspective that if we knew what's going to happen in the future, what would you do and what would be the result? And then from that, we're going to build what's called a regret table. We'll talk about that in a minute on the next slide. But let's look at this first column, and let's just consider the case where the economy is good. Now, if the economy is good, what decision would you make if you knew the economy was going to be good? Well, obviously, we would choose the office. And if we choose the office, how much would the decision maker regret that decision? Well, there would be zero regret, because that's the best decision that could be made given that future state of nature. So now then the question becomes, what happens if you happened to invest in the apartment instead of the office? how much would you regret that decision? Well, that regret is the difference between what you could have earned in terms of dollars and what you actually did earn, which in this case is $50,000. And so the amount of you would have regretted this decision is $50,000. Had you invested in the warehouse, that regret would be $70,000, which is $100,000 minus the $30,000 that you would have earned. And so we're going to do this, and we're going to create a regret table for each one of the future states of nature. We'll do this on the next slide. And then we're going to use a procedure that's called the minimax regret. We're going to choose the minimum of the maximum regret from that regret table to make our decision. So here's how this works. So we're going to build this table, and we already know the values of the regret for the states of nature. For the apartment, we know we would regret this by $50,000. For the office, we would not regret, because investing in the office is the best we could do. And for the warehouse, we would regret that by $70,000. Then for the fair states of nature, what's the best result? Well, that's $25,000. And so that if we made that decision, if the state of nature was fair, and we made that decision to invest in the apartment, we would not regret that decision. So there'd be zero regret. There would be $5,000 of regret if we had invested in an office, and now there would be $35,000 of regret had we invested in the warehouse, because this is 25,000 minus $10,000, or a total of 35,000. The difference between these two values is 35,000. And then finally, if the economy was poor, the best result would have been to invest in the warehouse. So there would be zero regret here. And if we had invested in the apartment, again, there would be $5,000 of regret. And if we had invested in the office, we would have $65,000 worth of regret. And again, that $65,000 is the difference between these two values, if you will, on the real number line. Now, there's something I want you to notice about this that's true for every one of these regret tables. For every state of nature will have at least one value where there is no regret, where the value is zero. There could be multiple zeros, but at least one. And the second thing that I want to notice, all of these values in this regret table are positive values or zero. They're positive or zero. There's never a negative. No, there's never a negative regret. All right. And so now our goal is that we want to avoid regret. And again, we said that I said earlier that the process that we're going to use is the mini-max regret. In order to calculate that regret, now we're going to look with respect to the apartment, and we're going to choose the maximum regret for each one of those, for each one of these possible decisions. And for the event, for the apartment, the maximum regret is 50,000. For the office, the maximum regret is 65,000. And for the warehouse, the maximum regret is 70,000. And now from among these, we want to choose the minimum of those maximum regrets because we want to avoid that. And of course, the minimum is of the maximums is 50,000. And why do we do that? Well, we're taking, if you will, a type of almost a pessimistic perception because we want to avoid regret. But by choosing 50,000 and investing in the apartment, we know that we will not regret that decision by more than 50,000. Whereas if we had invested in the office, we could have had 65,000. Or we invested in the warehouse, we could have had 70,000 of regret. And so our decision. Sorry, I didn't mean to erase that. Our decision, though, is, click the wrong button. But anyway, the decision is to invest in the apartment. And the regret will be no more. Okay. So let me go back and rebuild our regret table. Again, the regret for the office is 0. For the fair state of nature is to invest in the apartment, and for the poor is to invest in the warehouse. Our regret here was 50,000. Regret here was 70. The regret here was 5. The regret here was 35. The regret here was 5, and the regret here was 65. Our maximums was 50, 65, and 70. And we know, of course, that 50K is the minimum of the maximums. So mini max. The other point that I wanted to make here before I leave this, we finish this, is that some of you will add these regrets. So in other words, some will come up with 55 for the apartment, the regret, 70 for the office, and 105 for the warehouse. But that's not what you should do. Should just choose the maximum and just choose one of those values, because only one of those combinations can occur. And there's no way that all three, if you invest in the apartment, there's no way that the economy will be good, fair, and poor. It can only be one of these three. And so you choose the maximum rather than the sum of those regrets. I wish I could last point, I wish I could underline and do not add regrets. Someone will do that, but I would encourage you not to do that. All right, that concludes this lesson on decision making under conditions of uncertainty.